Shares for Santa Clara-based Intel have been rallying over the past few days, up about 14%. Yet these percentage changes could imply the stock's volatility. I sat down with the company's CFO, Stacy Smith, to talk about Intel's recent earnings. Intel keeps beating earnings estimates, forecasting stronger demand. The stock has rallied since the last earnings call, but it still lags behind other chip stocks. What are analysts and investors missing?
Well, I think the big story in our most recent earnings is how well the market's doing in a couple of segments, enterprise and emerging markets. And I'll really focus on emerging markets here. When we look out over the next few years, we believe that 2 out of 3 units, incremental units, come from the emerging markets. And what you have is just a fundamental shift where this technology has become affordable. It's critically important to people's lives. It's how they kind of join the knowledge-based economy. And our sales are doing really well in emerging markets, and that's been driving our financial results.
That said, you said consumer demand in the U.S. and Western Europe was soft. I mean, how long do you think that is going to keep up?
Well, we saw this happen as the economic crisis hit Europe last summer, and you had some of the debt shocks that hit the system. We saw the consumer pull back some. When you look at our Q2 guidance, it would suggest that we're expecting, kind of seasonal, which would say we still are expecting a little bit of sluggishness in mature market consumer in Q2. My guess is by the time we get to the second half, we'll see the consumer coming back.
So demand for
mature markets.
Demand for servers has been a big driver of growth, especially cloud computing servers. When do we reach the end of that upgrade cycle for businesses?
I don't think for a long time. Let's talk about the cloud for a minute. What you see is this explosion of devices that are computing and connecting to the internet. And for us, that's driving a build out of these big IP data centers. Just to give you a data point that I found fascinating. In 2010, the bits across the internet was more than the entire history of the internet up to 2010. And so you can see the impact of all of these devices, all of this knowledge and content that exists in the internet that's being served to these devices. And I think Intel's uniquely situated to take advantage of that.
According to IDC, PC shipments worldwide dropped unexpectedly in the first quarter, 3.2%. They had expected they would rise. How do you see the PC market evolving?
Well, we saw units up in Q1, and I think that what a lot of people miss, if you're in New York or you're on the west coast of the U.S., you miss the explosive growth that's happening in the emerging markets right now. My guess is that, if you look across the last 5 or 10 years, what you've seen is that unit growth in the PC market has been hovering at around 10% per year. What we have now is we have large portions of the world's population, China, Latin America, Eastern Europe, where all of a sudden the affordability of a computer has gotten to the point that you have hundreds of millions of new consumers that can afford a PC and where that technology is highly valuable to them. I think that's going to be the driver of the industry over the next few years, and we'll likely see robust growth rates because of it.
Intel hasn't made a big impact in the smartphone and tablet market so far, but you've made it clear you need to get into these markets. Why? I mean, why not rely on PC and server demand?
Well, it's an incremental opportunity that sits adjacent to the markets that we serve. When you step back from this, what we see is that you have growth going on in notebook computers. You have growth going on in the data center that's serving all of these devices that are connecting. You now have a new class of devices that are these small personal devices that compute and connect to the internet. You actually have this Internet of Things where, devices like cars and traffic lights and security systems are also computing and connecting to the internet. Those are large markets that sit adjacent to our existing markets, and they're markets where our technology, I think, allows us to win significant portions of them. And so for those, it's simple. It's an exciting growth opportunity that sits right next to our traditional markets that are also growing. So
in terms of tablets, Apple has obviously established the lead in that market with the iPad. How do you catch up to that? How do you narrow that lead?
For us, it's a simple playbook. If we can provide the best performance at any given power envelope, over time we win in the market. If you think back to our history with Apple, it's how we won their Mac line. It took a long time. Often these things are marathons, not sprints. But if we can consistently have leadership over everybody else in terms of process technology and manufacturing capability, if we can provide more performance at a given level of power, ultimately that performance, shines through. Consumers want that level of performance, and it allows us to win in the marketplace.
So how about phones? Bloomberg News actually broke the story that Intel is working on a phone with China's ZTE Corp. Where are you with that and other smartphone partnerships?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk specifically about products that haven't been announced. To a large extent, that's the responsibility of the partners that we sell to announce, what they're using in their phones and when they're going to hit the market. What I can say is that in the second half of this year, we have a product that starts ramping into production. It's an SoC product, and so it cleanly fits into the power envelope of a smartphone, and it provides industry-leading performance across a variety of vectors. I was playing with one of these devices recently and seeing how it did high-def video processing, and it was a spectacular experience. And so I think that when that hits the market, it's going to do well. We'll get the first phones in the market that have Intel inside, and then we go from there.
So Intel made some big acquisitions last year with McAfee and Infineon. Have we seen the last of Intel's billion-dollar acquisitions?
We have a history where we do lots of acquisitions to fill in technology holes or because we see something that's interesting that we want to integrate into our silicon. We're always looking for those kinds of things. To talk prospectively about big acquisitions is something we don't do for obvious reasons.
And one last question. Analysts have told us there's some concern about a difference between Intel's outlook and your customers' outlook. How would you respond to that?
You kind of have to ask them the question. What we see is a huge growth opportunity in the enterprise segment as all of these devices compute and connect to the internet. And we see a fantastic opportunity in the emerging markets. You have literally billions of consumers that can now afford the kind of technology that we sell. That technology is highly desirable. It can be life-changing in terms of them joining the knowledge-based economy. And then you see these very fast innovation cycles in the consumer segment of the market. So we look forward and see, a lot of excitement and a lot of growth in the markets that we serve.
That was Intel CFO Stacy Smith.